But did you watch the Andre Day performance in that Billie Holiday and the FBI? The FBI versus?
I did. I think the acting was the strongest thing about it. Susan Laurie Parks, the sister who wrote the screenplay, the great playwright. I guess still after watching it, my favorite Susan Laurie Parks adaptation for the screen remains Spike Lee's Girl 6. If y'all haven't seen it, and of course Teresa Randall, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know what happened in her career, who derailed her or shut her off, but she should be a household name as far as I'm concerned between that and Sugar Hill. But Lee Daniels, yeah, I reserve judgment. It certainly was a Lee Daniels directed project. You saw the trauma porn, you saw the emphasis on black pain and death, you saw the spectacle. It's Lee Daniels.
I never know where you're going, and sometimes it goes left, and I was like, "How do we get?"
Well, I mean, but in all fairness and defense of Lee Daniels, it is a white facing commercial media production, and like Berry Gordy said to at least according to the scholars who have done the scholarship on this, and for those who want to kind of check say what's real, what's not real, there are a number of, start with Billie Holiday herself, William Duffy, her co-writer, Lady Sings the Blues. And there are some, obviously some things like she wasn't born in Baltimore. Her mama wasn't, 13. Mom was 19, actually older than her father. She was born in Philly. Then they moved to Baltimore. But then there's a recent book, and there are a number of good books on Billie Holiday. There are over 40 books that have been written about Billie Holiday. My very good friend, Fair Griffin up at Columbia did a great one called If You Can't Be Free, Be a Mystery. I mean, and there's a number of books. The great Robert O'Mealy, another good brother out of Columbia, they have a jazz kind of formation workshop study group they do. He did a book on Lady Day, The Many Faces of Lady Day. But one of the more recent books is this one, John Sved, who's also up there. In fact, John Sved is an interesting, he is actually director for the Center of Jazz Study at Columbia. When this came out 2015, it's called Billie Holiday, the Musician and the Myth. If you want to get one single volume on that, do that, because you'll find out that let me finish the point I was going to make about Berry Gordy, and then we'll keep talking about this for a little while. As Berry Gordy told Diana Ross, who was concerned that this is a lot of fiction in this thing you're doing, this Lady Sings the Blues movie that you made, because Berry Gordy wanted to go into Hollywood. And he said, she said, I'm concerned about this. And his thing was, white people get to make up stuff in biopics. It's all imaginary. Why should black people be any different? And I think this current movie followed that same tack. As my old teacher, my old Jegna, Theophilo Benga would say, they mixed many things. They mixed many things. By the way, she didn't want to title this Lady Sings the Blues because she said, I'm not a blues singer. In fact, Billie Holiday did very few pure blues in her career. One of them was on the B side, actually, of Strange Fruit, which I think was Columbia let her release. Said, we ain't gonna record this, but we'll let you record it with another label. And she goes and records Strange Fruit, which she was introduced to in 1939 by a dude named Marenpool. Marenpool was his name, the author. He was a New York City teacher. He's a poet. He's credited not only with the lyrics for Strange Fruit, but he's also credited with helping out with another song called The House I Live In, the one that Paul Robeson and Frank Sinatra recorded. But at any rate, the B-side of that recording was a song called Fine and Mellow. It's one of the few blues that she did in terms of pure blues, and it linked her. And again, the ensemble cast was really something. I mean, Tyler James Williams come a long way since Everybody Loves Chris, right? He played a pivotal figure in Billie Holiday's life. The great Lester Young, the man who gave her the nickname Lady Day. In fact, Prez is the name that she gave to him. And they had a on again, off again relationship in the 50s. They didn't speak for a few years, and then they hooked up again, and they kind of back and forth. And there's a very famous recording, one of her few television broadcast recordings. Nat Henhoff and some others put together this thing on jazz, a live broadcast for CBS, I guess it was. And you see they got Count Basie, you see Jerry Mulligan, you see Coleman Hawkins, and she does Fine and Mellow, which is on the other side of the Strange Fruit recording. And so you see Lester Young, and they had this thing, and it's really amazing. Y'all can go on YouTube and watch it if you want. You hear them playing, then Jerry Mulligan takes his solo, and then Coleman Hawkins takes his solo, and then here comes Lester Young, the pure blues man. And you see her just look, she just looks at him, and they vibing back and forth, and then he goes through his little solo, and she's just like, and she looks at him and says, and when he finishes, she comes in smooth. He wears high draped pants, stripes are really yellow. He wears high draped pants, stripes are really yellow. But when he starts in to love me, he is so fine and mellow. And then you just like them two right there. Now in the movie, you don't get that. Why? Because this vehicle in some ways is almost overpowered by the sister playing Billie Holiday, and the narrative it recedes into the background. And the truth is so much more fascinating than what was portrayed. And if you watch it, I think there's almost an overburdening of this trope of Billie Holiday as a tragic figure. In fact, I'll say one more thing, and then let's keep talking about this. We'll go back and forth. I thought I pulled another book that I think is very important. If you want to, and there's a lot of stuff been written on jazz. This is a very good book by Gerald Horne. It's called Jazz and Justice. Came out a couple of years ago. Racism and the Political Economy of the Music. You can't understand, in fact, not even a couple of years ago, it's 2019. I guess it is a couple of years ago now. You can't understand the United States versus Billie Holiday in any way without understanding the context of the war on Black people that really kind of, again, reinforces the idea that this hostage situation, this abusive relationship, this codependent narrative that keeps popping up in these documentaries, many of which get dropped in Black History Month, again, going exactly against what Carter G. Woodson was talking about. In fact, Woodson said that. He said about the only thing these mischievous orators have to talk about is the race problem and how it can be solved. That is not Black History Month. But at any rate, you know, when you read Horne's book and you look at stuff related to that, what you see is that there was a war, the war against Black life, which began as soon as we got snatched into this criminal enterprise, found its way into a cultural war as well. That Harry Anslinger character, that's the guy who set up that unit, that anti-narcotic unit, that's extension of the federal government's war on Black people, because remember now, this is the same guy, Anslinger, because you don't really get too much of this. If you're listening and you kind of know the backstories, you can hear some of the gestures toward it. It's like any other thing. I'm sure they tried to cram everything in. Anslinger was one of the feds who was coming out of the Department of Treasury during Prohibition. They were fighting Prohibition. Remember, Prohibition is like from 1920 to like 1933. And they failed because alcohol legal. Now, Billie Holiday was born in 1915. Just before she was born, 1914, a law was passed that made opiates illegal. Because before that, like the same plant that they would get cocaine from was what they used to make Coca-Cola. We know that. All the people know that. But there was no federal drug policy. Marijuana wasn't illegal, this kind of thing, you know. So they started criminalizing drugs after that. And you know, it's interesting. I was going back through the New York Times. I was reading some other stuff, and I went back through the New York Times. There's an article in the New York Times from February 8th, 1914. Here's the headline. Negro cocaine fiends are a new Southern menace. Murder and insanity increasing among lower class Blacks because they have taken to sniffing since deprived of whiskey by Prohibition. What the hell does that even mean? In this long article, which takes up a whole page, you know, at times to do those whole page exposés, they talking about super Negroes in the South. They say this is not like morphine, which is, you know, people can take, but it can help aid in digestion. It's a different way to be consumed. No, cocaine, you sniff it. And if you sniff it, it just automatically surges. It sends you into this surge. And they start talking about these super Negroes who feel like they are impervious to bullets. Then they start talking about how this one cat, the police came in and shot him. In fact, let me see, can I read it? Because I pulled up the article. The thing will make you Oh my God. Let me see if I can find it right quick. If I can't, I'll just have to yeah. No, I'm not gonna be able to find it because the thing is oh wait, proof against bullets. But the drug produces several other conditions that make the fiend a particularly dangerous criminal. This is New York Times. One of these conditions is a temporary immunity to shock, a resistance to the knockdown effect of fatal wounds. Then he talks about this guy in Asheville, North Carolina, the chief of police, who goes to arrest this black man who they're accused of assaulting people. And he says, when the unsuspecting Negro reached the middle of the room, the officer closed the door to prevent the escape. The guy, he said, pulled the knife. Sound familiar? Knowing that he must kill the man or be killed himself. I feared for my life. Okay, George Zimmerman, yesterday, anniversary of Trayvon Martin. The chief drew his revolver, placed the muzzle over the Negro's heart, and fired, intending to, quote, kill him right quick. But the shot did not even, let me go up to the top, did not even stagger the man. Oh, come on. He said delayed death. Now I'm pausing here, and then let's pause here. Let's have some conversation about the context in this, in which this is happening, because I'm thinking about, I didn't watch Bill Maher. I can't watch Bill Maher. I have to watch Bill Maher for things that people are talking about Bill Maher watching, because his white nationalism vacillates between soft white nationalism and hard white nationalism. He's a white nationalist, and his nativism is barely concealed. You know, he's a nativist, and I don't you know, begrudge him that. I understand. You know, he's scared, like the rest of a lot of white people scared. You know, not the people watching us, because they choose humanity. Y'all choose humanity over this concept of whiteness, which has to go. But you know, this idea that these Negroes are dangerous, and they're dangerous from using drugs. The drugs, by the way, that everybody uses. Hell, if Bill Maher, out of every 3 jokes he tells, one of them is a drug joke about drug use. And so, but when it's black people, the feds came against them, and realizing, and Gerald writes about this in Jazz and Justice. He says these black musicians in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s and 50s, many of them had ties to the black political radicals. Some of them played for the Garvey movement. Many of them played for the Communist Party at stuff they had. And remember, this Communist Party is doing a lot of interracial stuff. Billie Holiday gets not caught up. Billie Holiday gets pulled into that world. Billie Holiday, politically, her politics very liberal in that sense, interracial, this kind of thing. And when the feds start going after these black musicians for abusing drugs, they start trying to break break them. You start trying to get them to flip on each other. They won't do it. And very quickly, this cat, Harry Aslinger, realizes we can't get them to turn on each other. They tried to be anti-marijuana. They wouldn't do it. He hated jazz. He said jazz sounds like it comes from the jungles in the dead of the night. This is the white boy. And you see some of that. But they tried to go after him first on these marijuana laws they start passing. We were all in solidarity. When they couldn't get to them, they decided to shrink their target to one person, Billie Holiday. They went after Billie Holiday because they figured they could take her down if just harass her. And one of her godchildren said, based on notes that his mother had, who was Billie Holiday's friend, and again, he Sped writes about this. He says, you know, to the day she died, my mama died. She said it was the feds that killed Billie Holiday. They drove her to that. She kept trying to get clean. And she realized that I'm sick. In fact, she writes about that in her book. She says, imagine if the government chased sick people with diabetes, put a tax on insulin, this is Billie Holiday, and drove it into the black market, told doctors they couldn't treat them. By the way, that is true. The scene where she's in the courtroom and she says, just send me the treatment. Now, what is not true is the judge gave her the year and a day, and she looks back, starts cussing at the lawyer. I paid you all this money. She didn't have a lawyer. She was not represented. All right. Told doctors they couldn't treat them, and then caught them, prosecuted them for not paying their taxes, and then sent them to jail. If we did that, everyone would know we were crazy. Yet we do practically the same thing every day in the week to sick people hooked on drugs. She said today, I'm sick. Help. The jails are full, and the problem is getting worse every day. And that is disproportionately black and brown, even during this period. So I'm saying all that as a backdrop to say that they went after Billie Holiday because they couldn't crack the black musicians, many of whom got caught up in heroin. Many of, and in fact, she talks about, in fact, let me just say a couple other things about that in terms of the movie. First of all, never watch a movie, never watch a documentary as a substitute for study. That's simply not it. So when people say, you know, I got a good documentary and will show my students, okay, if that's all you're going to do, it's better than nothing, but it should never be nothing. You got to surround it, because even now people are thinking, oh, well, what else is not true about that documentary? That film. It's a lot of stuff like that. But